Stories from Shadefeet Hollow. In the late summer of the year 1442, by shire reckoning, near the furthest edge of the East Farthing, up the river Witchywindle from the Brandywine, and just a stone throw away from the banks, there lived a family of hobbits. Now don't think that because they lived a rural life that they were unkempt. They kept things simple, though, only building, tilling, or killing what they had need of to survive. Thanks to the workings of the founding couple of the homestead and the surname, Shadefeet Hollow was protected in ways even their progeny didn't fully understand. There were fortifications beyond the sturdy framework of their buried burrow that allowed them the safety in their glade, despite being so close to the old forest. The third generation of Shadefeet were now being raised in the home nestled at the edge of the hollow, which jutted out from the main tree line. Paxton and Winsey, the current Ma and Pa Shadefeet, had 2 young'uns already, with another on the way. Their girls were named Atehn, the eldest at 7, and Jabala, age 2, had just started to run more than walk on her wobbly legs. While they both ran the small farm, Pa hunted, trapped, and fished for game up and down the river. He was said to be one of the best bowmen south of Bree, something Atehn was very proud and envious of. Ma wasn't just an excellent cook and gardener, she was an expert naturalist, and her remedies were regarded highly in all of the East Farthing. Atehn had spent her first years hovering around her Ma as she gathered herbs and fungus, then dried and prepared them for mixing various powders, salves, and tinctures. Recently, though, Atehn had been getting restless, straying further and further into the sparse trees behind the burrow during the day. Her parents tolerated this so long as she kept within earshot, since after 50 paces or so, as the big folk walk, the undergrowth became a dense thicket for many strides more before merging with the old forest proper. Pa had told her that while there were dire foxes in the region of the old forest, he had never seen one near the hollow. According to his stories, in addition to being slightly larger and of an ashen color, they were also much more aggressive than the ones he'd known in his hometown of Frogmorton, which was a few days' travels northwest of the river. He also noted that the creatures who lived in the old forest seemed to prefer the gloom of its dense canopy and did not often stray from it. Her hikes with Pa and gathering rambles with Ma had taught her all she needed to know of the few dangers in the sheltered grove. Atehn avoided the few toxic plants and fungus that grew, but also knew which ones she could snack on. She could detect the sound of snakes slithering, as well as recognize which ones to especially avoid. The hawks kept to the riverbank tree line for the most part, but she knew to be mindful of their calls, passing shadows, and the panic of other wildlife. She longed to go with her father on his hunts, but so far he had refused to let her accompany him. Pa carved fantastic wooden toys, jewelry, statues, and tools for his wife and girls, but for the past couple years he had made weapons for Atehn to make up for leaving her behind, as well as to prepare her for possibly joining when she was older. Whenever she broke or outgrew her bow, staff, sword, or shield, he would return from the next trip with a new one carved from tougher stock than the last, uniquely designed and etched with its very own name. She kept each one she retired on the wall beside her bed, where she often reminisced with them about their past adventures, especially when she couldn't sleep at night. While her aim had improved in archery, the strength to get distance had not come as quickly. Her father's current challenge of carving various bow types in order to give her the most advantage for her stature was pushing the limits of his amateur skill as a whittler. To practice, they had made different targets behind the burrow, as well as a sparring dummy, since her sister was not only too young to be formidable, but didn't really have the same zeal for combat. For all her vigor, equipment, and training, she had yet to kill anything, even the fish she helped catch. She just couldn't bring herself to release after taking aim at a squirrel, coney, or bird. Regardless, she carried her precious gear everywhere she went, as she pretended to patrol the backyard. This particular morning, Atehn grabbed Ingel, Donatok, and Naladin, her sword, shield, and bow respectively, with a full leather quiver. On her way out of her bedroom, she gently stroked the splintered halves of waxit that hung on the wall beside her bed, with the rest of her retired gear. The fallen walking staff had lasted over a year before he broke, living up to his namesake against the large boulder beside the dock just 2 days before Paul left on a trade run. She hoped he would have time to carve a replacement while he traveled and took care of affairs in town. After a solemn farewell, she packed a couple biscuits from the table into her pocket, grabbed her homemade waterskin, and set out the door, intending to surpass her current furthest point from home.